Hello all, this is Ben Falk for KillerSites.com. Welcome to part 17 in our series on building a PHP-based login system. And I wanted to take a screencast or two and discuss how to build in some sort of member permissions feature. You'll often find this online, for example, with the Killer Sites forums. We have some users who are administrators or moderators who can delete other members' posts, and we have some users who are just regular members and they can only post things themselves. So I would like to add a little bit of this sort of functionality to the PHP login. I'd like to add member types, allowing some members to be administrators, which are allowed to add new members, and the rest of the members are simply standard members who don't have that ability. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to need to modify our database a little bit. So I've opened up PHPMyAdmin and I selected the members table, and the first thing we're going to need to do is we need to add an additional field. So I'm going to add one field and I'm going to add it after the username, but exactly where you put it doesn't really matter. So go, and I'm going to call this field type. I'm going to give it an int, and let me go ahead and save it. There we go. So now we've added a type, and then I'm going to go to the Browse tab and modify each of these records. And I'm going to set admin type to 1 and the other temp type to 2. Let's go. Okay, so that's been saved. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new table in the database. So I'm going to go back to login. I'm going to create a table called permissions. And it's going to hold two fields. And I should stress as we're getting started here, the goal of these couple screencasts is to add some sort of very basic member permissions functionality. Enough to get you started and give you an idea of what might be possible. So the first field is going to be called ID, and the second field is going to be called, let's call it name. So this is going to be a varchar, that should be fine. ID, we'll make it an int, and we want ID to be the primary key and auto increment. So I believe that should do it. Let's save. Excuse me, let me go ahead and I'll put 32 in for the length. Actually, let me put in 32 here as well. There we go. So now we have a new permissions table, and let's go ahead and insert two entries into it. ID we can leave alone. The first record I'm going to call admin, and the second record I'm going to call members. Or just member actually, and then I'll hit go. Okay, and so if you go back to the members table and hit browse, you'll notice that these types now correspond with permissions. So admin is type 1, which is an admin, has admin permissions. And obviously you could expand this table, add additional columns, whatever you want to do, but like I said, this is a pretty simple example. So with that in place, I'm going to open up Coda, and let's do a little bit of modifications to our code. I'm working with the exact code that was used in parts 1 through 16, so you can download that from the Killer Sites University if you want to work from the exact files that I'm using. So let's go ahead and make some changes to this. The main one that we want to do is we're going to go down little ways down here in the statement section. And what I'm going to do is I want the user, when they log in, I want to set a session variable that indicates their permissions, what type of user they are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here, I'm simply going to copy and paste, and I'm going to call this type, and then I will add in type as well. So that's the first portion. And then we need to modify this query so we actually can get the type. And what I'm going to do with my example is we're going to want to get the username and what did we need? We need the ID and the username and also their type. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look not for this, but I'm going to find the type name, which is listed here. So let's go up here. So we want ID and we want permissions.type. So we're actually going to query two tables. So I'll add a comma and I'll add permissions as well. And then I need to specify, because ID exists in both the members and the permissions table, I need to specify members.id. And we're also going to grab permissions.type. And then at the end here, we also need to do and where members.type equals permissions.id. And then we need to change the number of parameters here. Actually, we can leave that alone, excuse me, because these replace the question marks here. But we need to change the bind result and add type, and that's going to be referenced here. So I believe that's good. Let me save this. Let's do a quick test just to make sure this is working correctly. So I'm just going to echo out the session variable and exit, excuse me. Okay, so let me log in. And let me check this. Oh, I know what it is. I need to call it, I called it name in the database. So let me just double check and make sure. Yeah, that's what it should be. So I saved it. Let's go back to Firefox. Refresh the page. There we go. So you'll notice that it's echoing out the session variable that we just created. So now this gives us all sorts of abilities now that we didn't have before. I'm not going to demonstrate this exactly, but for example, let me just delete these two lines. Perhaps you could, instead of redirecting simply to members.php, you could actually change it. You could do something like if the session type equals admin, you could then redirect to a specific admin page, and otherwise with an else you could redirect to the members.php page. So I'm going to leave this alone for now, like so. But that is one option that you can consider to extend this example. And what I'm going to do is, I find it pretty useful to have a function which checks if the current user is an administrator. It saves me from repeating a bit of code. So I'm going to go ahead and add that function within the config file. If you have quite a few functions that you're using, you might consider moving this into a separate functions.php file within includes. But this is pretty convenient, and the config.php is already included in all the individual pages. Okay, and I'm simply going to do function, let me fix this. There we go. Function is admin, and all it's going to do is it's going to check that session variable. And if it's admin, I'm going to return true. And otherwise, I'm going to return false. So that'll give us a little bit of additional functionality. And the last thing I'm going to do for this specific example is I'm going to go ahead and modify the members page. And exactly how you would do this in your example depends. If you end up having a lot of different files within members and within your admin sections, might make sense to separate out individual pages. But just as a quick example here, let me go ahead and show you how we can use that function I just created. So I'm going to open up with PHP tags. I'm going to do if is admin. And let me just, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to copy and paste this. Else. Okay. So what this file is going to do now is it's going to check if the current logged in user is an administrator. If they are, it's going to show this information. If not, if they're just a regular member, it's going to show this. So let's go ahead and change this slightly, and I'll give you a demonstration and actually show you how this works in the browser. So I'm going to just have a members area. So that's good. And we only want members to be able to change their password and log out. But for admins, change this to admin, and we're going to keep the register member functionality. And I believe that's it for this. Let's go ahead and test this. Let me just make sure login is correct. That looks fine. And let's check the config because I made a mistake. Oops, you probably saw that. Okay, so that should fix it. So let's log in as admin. Yep, it says admin area, and it says we've successfully logged into the admin area. So let me log out. And let me just double check. My other member was temp. Let's log in here, and you'll notice they enter a new section called members area, and that does not have the register functionality. So I believe that wraps it up for this tutorial. In the next tutorial, I'm going to be talking about how to modify the register.php page to make sure that regular members cannot access it, and also to add in the ability to set the members' permissions that you're creating.